My father called me into his office on a Tuesday and told me I was getting married. You're marrying Dante Vittorio in 3 days. The wedding is Saturday. It's already been arranged. I stared at the contract, and my name next to a stranger's. At the word transfer, like I was property. You're giving me to the Mafia boss we've been at war with. We're using you to end that war. You're the guarantee. My brother looked at me with contempt. Better you than someone important. 3 days later, I married the devil of New York. Dante Vittorio, 6'2" of power and cold eyes. The priest asked if I accepted the bond. I thought about my sister, about my mother, about everyone who would die if I said no. I said yes. The bond snapped into place. BL&GL, unbreakable. That night, he said, I won't touch you until you want me to. I didn't know if that was mercy or cruelty. I didn't know that in 3 months I'd love him. I didn't know my family sold me twice. Once to him, once to the Bratva, and he'd save me from both. I didn't know the devil would be my salvation. My name is Kai Nakamura. This is how I was given to a monster and found my home in his arms. Busties. Welcome back to Cozy BL Corner. I missed you. It's been a few days, but I'm back. With a story that's going to destroy you emotionally as always. New here? Subscribe so you never miss the drama, the tears, and the swoon-worthy romance. Get comfortable. This one hits differently. Let's go. I remember that detail because Tuesdays were normally my day off from family obligations. The one day a week I didn't have to pretend to be useful to the Nakamura clan. The one day I could just exist without being reminded that I was the family's greatest disappointment. Kai Nakamura, the Omega's son, the failure, the waste of perfectly good genetics in a family of powerful alphas. But when your father is the head of one of the most powerful crime families on the East Coast and he summons you, you don't get to say no. Even if you're the son nobody wanted. I knocked on the heavy oak door of his study, that familiar knot of anxiety already forming in my stomach. 23 years of being the disappointment had taught me that nothing good ever came from private meetings with my father. Come. His voice was cold. It was always cold when he spoke to me. Like he couldn't quite believe he'd produce something as useless as an Omega when all his other children were strong, dominant alphas. I opened the door. The study was exactly as I remembered. Dark wood, expensive whiskey, the smell of cigars and old money. My father sat behind his massive desk like a king on a throne. My oldest brother, Hiroshi, stood beside him, arms crossed, looking at me with that familiar expression of contempt. Neither of them smiled. Neither of them ever smiled at me. Sit down, Kai. I sat in the chair across from the desk and waited. My hands were shaking slightly, so I clasped them in my lap where they wouldn't be visible. Show no weakness. That was the first lesson I'd learned in this family. Weakness got you eaten alive. My father didn't waste time with pleasantries. He never did with me. The war with the Vtorio family is over, he said, sliding a folder across the desk toward me. We've negotiated a peace settlement. I blinked. The Vtorio family, the rival crime syndicate that had been systematically destroying our operations for the past 6 months. We'd lost territory, money, soldiers. The Vtorios were winning, and everyone knew it. That's good news, I said carefully, not understanding why he was telling me this. The terms of the peace required a gesture of good faith from our family, my father continued, his eyes cold and assessing. A guarantee that we won't betray the agreement. Something valuable enough that the Vtorios can trust we're serious about ending hostilities. The knot in my stomach pulled tighter. We're giving them you. The words didn't make sense at first. I heard them, but my brain couldn't quite process what they meant. I don't understand. You're getting married, Hiroshi said, and there was something almost like satisfaction in his voice. To Dante Vittorio. The wedding is in 3 days. The room tilted. What? It's a political marriage, my father said, like he was discussing a business merger instead of my entire life. The Vtorios demanded an Omega from our family as a bond of peace. A permanent connection between our organizations that can't be easily severed. You're that connection. You're selling me. The words came out flat. Emotionless. Because if I let myself feel what I was actually feeling, I'd break down right here in front of them. And that was unacceptable. We're using you for something worthwhile for the first time in your life, my father corrected. The Vtorio family has agreed to end the war in exchange for a marriage alliance. You'll be bonded to Dante Vittorio. It's permanent, legally binding, and not negotiable. I looked at my brother, at the man who'd tormented me our entire childhood for being weak, for being Omega, for being everything wrong with the Nakamura bloodline. You could have sent Kenji, I said, naming our youngest brother. Another alpha, of course, but at least he'd always been kind to me. Or negotiated something else. Why does it have to be me? Because you're expendable, Hiroshi said bluntly. Kenji actually contributes to this family. You've done nothing but embarrass us since the day you presented as Omega. At least this way, your existence serves a purpose. The words should have hurt. Maybe they would have years ago, but I'd heard variations of this my entire life. I was numb to it now. Does Mother know? I asked. Your mother understands that sacrifices must be made for the good of the family, my father said. She's accepted it, as will you. And if I refuse? My father's expression didn't change, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. Then the war continues. The Vtorios will destroy us completely. Your mother will die. Your sister will be orphaned. Hundreds of our people will be killed. All because you were too selfish to do the one useful thing you've ever been asked to do. He knew exactly how to manipulate me. Had probably been planning this speech for weeks. Because despite everything, despite the contempt and the dismissal and the constant reminder that I was worthless, I still loved my family. Still wanted to protect them, even if they'd never protected me. The wedding is Saturday, my father continued, pulling a document from the folder. You'll be delivered to the Vtorio estate Friday evening. Everything has been arranged. All you need to do is show up and say I do. He slid the document across the desk. A contract. I picked it up with numb fingers and read words that would change my life forever. Marriage contract between Kai Nakamura and Dante Vittorio. Permanent bonding. Transfer of Omega from Nakamura family to Vtorio family. Terms, irrevocable. Transfer of Omega. Like I was property. Like I was something that could be bought and sold and traded. I guessed to them I was. You have until Friday to say goodbye to anyone you want to say goodbye to, my father said. I suggest you use the time wisely. Does anyone else know? Kenji? Yuki. I named my youngest siblings, the only ones who'd ever treated me like I mattered. They'll be informed after you're gone. This isn't a negotiation, Kai. This is an order. You will marry Dante Vittorio. You will bond with him. And you will secure peace for this family. That's your purpose now. Try not to fail at it the way you've failed at everything else. I stood up because sitting there any longer would break something in me that I couldn't afford to have broken. Not yet. Not while they were watching. Is that all? That's all. You're dismissed. I walked out of that office with my head held high and my hands clenched into fists to keep them from shaking. Made it all the way to my room. The smallest bedroom in the family compound. The one tucked away in a corner where I could be easily forgotten before I let myself feel anything. Then I collapsed on my bed and stared at the ceiling and tried to process that in 3 days, I'd be married to a man I'd never met. Bonded for life to the head of the family that had been trying to destroy mine. Given away like I was nothing. Because to the Nakamuras, I was nothing. I'd always known that. But having it confirmed, having it made so brutally, explicitly clear, still hurt in ways I didn't want to examine. I didn't cry. I learned a long time ago that crying didn't help. That showing pain only gave them more ammunition to use against me. So I lay there in the dark and tried to imagine what Dante Vittorio would be like. I'd heard stories, of course. Everyone had. Dante Vittorio, the devil of New York. The man who'd inherited his family's empire at 19 and had spent the last decade consolidating power through violence and strategic brilliance. He was ruthless, terrifying, the kind of alpha who made other alphas submit through sheer force of personality. And in 3 days, he'd be my husband. The bond would be permanent, unbreakable. I'd feel his emotions, and he'd feel mine. We'd be connected in ways that went beyond legal contracts and political alliances. It was the most intimate connection two people could share. And I'd be sharing it with a stranger who'd been at war with my family for 6 months, who'd probably spent that time killing our soldiers and destroying our operations, who'd accepted me as payment like I was a commodity instead of a person. I wondered if he'd be cruel, if he'd punish me for my family's actions, if he'd use the bond to control me, to hurt me, to remind me every day that I was his property now. I wondered if he knew I didn't want this. If he cared. Probably not. Men like Dante Vittorio didn't care about what Omegas wanted. They took what they wanted and everyone else just had to deal with it. I must have fallen asleep eventually because I woke to knocking on my door. Pale morning light was streaming through my window. My phone said it was Wednesday, 2 days until my wedding. Okay, can I come in? Yuki, my little sister, the only person in this family who'd ever looked at me with something other than contempt or indifference. Yeah. She opened the door slowly, her face already showing signs of crying. She was only 16, still in high school, still young enough to believe that family should mean love instead of obligation. Is it true? She asked, her voice breaking. Hiroshi said you're getting married. To Dante Vittorio. He said you're leaving and we won't see you again. I sat up, making room for her on the bed. She collapsed next to me and wrapped her arms around me like she could keep me there through sheer force of will. It's true. I'm getting married Saturday. It's a political thing, to end the war. But you don't want to, do you? You don't even know him. They're making you do this. Yeah, they're making me do this. That's not fair. She pulled back, tears streaming down her face. You're not property. You're my brother. How can they just give you away like you don't matter? I didn't have an answer for that. Or rather, I had an answer she was too young to hear. That in our world, omegas were property. That family loyalty meant sacrifice. That sometimes the people who were supposed to love you would throw you away if it served their purposes. I need you to promise me something, I said instead, wiping tears from her face. I need you to be smart. Don't fight them. Don't make them angry. Just keep your head down, finish school, and get out of here as soon as you can. I don't want you to go. I know, but I have to. And you have to stay safe. Promise me, Yuki. Promise you'll be careful. She nodded, crying harder. We sat there together for a long time, neither of us saying what we both knew. That this was goodbye. That once I was bonded to Dante Vittorio, I'd belong to his family. The Nakamuras wouldn't want me back even if I begged. This was the last time I'd see her. Maybe the last time I'd see anyone who'd ever cared about me. When she finally left, I had one day left to prepare for a future I didn't want with a man I didn't know. I spent it alone, packing what little I owned, writing letters I'd never sent, trying to memorize the feeling of being in my own room, my own space, before I became someone else's property forever. Friday came too quickly. They sent a car at 6 p.m. Black Mercedes with tinted windows. My father didn't come to say goodbye. Neither did Hiroshi. Only Yuki was waiting by the door when I came down with my single suitcase containing everything I was allowed to bring to my new life. I love you, she whispered, hugging me one last time. Don't forget that. No matter what happens, I love you. I love you too. Be safe. Then I got in the car, and the driver pulled away from the only home I'd ever known. I didn't look back. Couldn't. If I looked back, I'd break. The drive to the Vtorio estate took an hour. Out of the city, into the hills, to a compound that made my family's home look modest. Gates, security, cameras everywhere. This wasn't just a house. This was a fortress. The car stopped in front of the main building. The driver opened my door, took my suitcase, and gestured for me to follow him inside. The interior was exactly what I expected. Expensive, cold, beautiful in the way museums are beautiful. Meant to be admired, not lived in. Marble floors. Art that probably cost more than I'd make in a lifetime. Everything pristine and perfect and utterly intimidating. A woman in her 50s appeared. Housekeeper, I guessed, based on her uniform. She looked me over with an expression I couldn't read. You're the Nakamura Omega. Okay, my name is Kai. Follow me. I'll show you to your room. Mr. Vtorio will see you at dinner. 8 p.m. sharp. Don't be late. She led me through hallways that seemed to go on forever, up a grand staircase, down another corridor, to a door at the end. This is yours. Bathroom through there. Closet has been stocked with appropriate clothing. If you need anything, use the phone. Someone will bring it. She left before I could ask any of the 1,000 questions racing through my mind. I opened the door to my new room and stepped inside. It was beautiful, bigger than my entire living space back home. King-size bed, sitting area, windows that overlooked gardens I could see even in the fading light. Everything expensive and tasteful and completely impersonal. A cage, a beautiful, luxurious cage. I sat on the edge of the bed and checked the time. 7 p.m. 1 hour until I met the man who would own me for the rest of my life. I should probably shower, change, make myself presentable. Instead, I sat there and tried to breathe through the panic that was threatening to overwhelm me. This was real. This was actually happening. Tomorrow I'd be married, bonded, connected forever to a man I'd never met. A man who'd agreed to accept me as payment for peace like I was currency instead of a person. At 7:55, I forced myself to move. Found clothes in the closet that actually fit. Someone had researched my size. Put on something that seemed appropriate for meeting your future husband for the first time. Dark pants. Simple shirt. Nothing that would draw attention. I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the person staring back. Pale. Scared. Young. I was 23, but I looked 16. Too small. Too soft. Everything in Omega wasn't supposed to be in a world that valued strength above everything else. No wonder my family had been so eager to get rid of me. At exactly 8 p.m., I made my way back downstairs following half-remembered directions from the housekeeper. Found what had to be the dining room. Massive table that could seat 20, set for 2 at one end. And there, standing by the window with a glass of wine, was Dante Vittorio. I'd seen photos. Everyone had seen photos of the Devil of New York. But photos didn't capture the reality of him. He was tall, maybe 6'2", broad-shouldered in a way that spoke of power, of strength, of an alpha in his prime. Dark hair, strong jaw, and eyes that were nearly black, cold, and assessing as they turned to look at me. He was beautiful in the way dangerous things are beautiful. Like a predator, like something that could kill you and make it look graceful. I froze in the doorway, every instinct screaming at me to run. He looked me over slowly, taking in every detail. I felt stripped bare under that gaze, like he could see straight through to all the fear and inadequacy I was trying to hide. Nakamura. His voice was deep, controlled, the kind of voice that made people obey without question. Gomein, sit down. It wasn't a request. I walked to the chair across from where he'd been standing and sat because I didn't know what else to do. My hands were shaking again. I hid them under the table. Dante moved to the chair at the head of the table, close enough to touch if he wanted to, far enough that I didn't feel completely trapped, and sat with the kind of grace that came from absolute confidence. Wine? He asked, already pouring before I could answer. I don't drink. You do now. He slid the glass toward me. You look like you need it. He wasn't wrong. I picked up the glass with both hands to keep them steady and took a small sip. Expensive. Of course it was expensive. Everything in this house was expensive. You're younger than I expected, Dante said, and I couldn't tell if that was a complaint or an observation. I'm 23. You look 16. I get that a lot. Are you always this quiet, or are you just terrified right now? The blunt question caught me off guard. I met his eyes for the first time. A mistake because the intensity there made me want to look away immediately. Both, probably. Something that might have been amusement flickered across his face. Honest. I appreciate that. Your family spent 6 months lying to me. It's refreshing to hear truth for once. Staff appeared with food, multiple courses, beautifully presented. I wasn't hungry, but I forced myself to eat because not eating would be rude, and I didn't want to give him any reason to be angry. We ate in silence for a few minutes. Then Dante set down his fork and looked at me with those cold, assessing eyes. Do you know why you're here, Kai? My family gave me to you. To end the war. That's the political answer. But do you know what you actually are to me? I shook my head, not trusting my voice. Your leverage. A guarantee that your family won't betray the peace agreement. As long as I have you, as long as we're bonded, they can't move against me without hurting you. And as much as your father might not value you personally, he won't risk the political fallout of breaking a marriage bond. It would make him look weak. So I'm a hostage. You're a political tool. There's a difference. He took a sip of wine. But I want to make something very clear. I didn't ask for this. I didn't want an Omega bride. I was winning that war. Another month, and I would have crushed your family completely. But my advisors thought peace was more strategic. Thought having a connection to the Nakamura family would be useful for future operations. So I agreed to the marriage. You agreed to own me. Yes, I agreed to own you. Because in our world, that's what this is. Ownership. You belong to me now. Legally. Politically. And tomorrow, once we're bonded biologically. He leaned forward, and I fought the urge to lean back. But I'm not a monster, despite what you've probably heard. I won't hurt you unless you give me reason to. I won't force you into anything you're not ready for. And I won't punish you for your family's sins as long as you don't give me cause to doubt your loyalty. What does that mean? Loyalty, it means you're a Vtorio now, not a Nakamura. It means if your family contacts you, you tell me. If they ask you for information, you refuse and report it. If they try to use you against me, you choose me. Every time, without hesitation. His eyes were like ice. Can you do that? Could I? Could I betray my family? The family that had thrown me away like garbage. For a man who'd just admitted he owned me? I don't know, I said honestly. I've never been good at betrayal. Then learn. Because if I find out you're feeding information to your family, if I discover you're working against me in any way, the consequences won't be pleasant. For you or for the people you care about. Are you threatening my sister? I'm telling you the stakes. Your sister is 16, still in school, not involved in family business. As long as she stays that way, as long as you stay loyal, she's safe. But if you betray me, Kai, I'll make you watch while I destroy everyone you've ever loved. And then I'll make you live with that knowledge for the rest of your life. He said it so calmly, like he was discussing the weather instead of threatening to destroy my world. Do we understand each other? I understood perfectly. He was a monster. A beautiful, terrifying monster who just laid out exactly what my life would be like. Obey or watch everyone I love suffer. We understand each other. Good. He stood, and I realized dinner was over. The wedding is tomorrow at 2 p.m. Small ceremony. Just witnesses. Nothing romantic. After, we'll complete the bond. Then this becomes real and permanent. Until then, you're free to explore the estate. My security will make sure you don't leave. Sleep well, Kai. Tomorrow changes everything. He left me sitting alone at that massive table with half-finished food and a glass of wine I hadn't wanted. I sat there for a long time after he was gone, trying to process what had just happened. Dante Vittorio was everything I'd feared and somehow worse. Cold, calculating, absolutely certain of his power over me. But he'd also been honest. Brutally, terrifyingly honest. And somehow that was worse than if he'd just lied. I made my way back to my room eventually. Lay in that enormous bed and stared at the ceiling and tried not to think about tomorrow. About the bond that would tie me to him forever. About becoming property in a way that went beyond legal contracts. I didn't sleep. Just lay there in the dark and waited for morning to come and take away what little freedom I had left. The wedding was exactly as clinical and impersonal as Dante had promised. They dressed me in white, traditional for Omegas, apparently. Expensive clothes that fit perfectly because someone had measured me while I slept. Guided me to a small chapel on the estate grounds where a priest waited with paperwork instead of a Bible. Dante was already there. Black suit. No expression. He looked at me once when I entered, his eyes tracking from my head to my feet and back up again, but he didn't say anything. There were witnesses. 5 of them. Dante's advisors, I guessed. Men in expensive suits who watched the proceedings with a detached interest of people attending a business meeting instead of a wedding. The ceremony was in Italian. I didn't understand most of it. Didn't matter. The only words I needed to understand were the ones at the end. Do you, Kai Nakamura, accept this bond? I looked at Dante, at the man who would own me in every possible way in about 30 seconds. At the future I didn't want, but had no power to refuse. I thought about Yuki, about my mother, about all the people who would die if this war continued. Ido, do you, Dante Vittorio, accept this bond? Ido. Then by the power vested in me, I declare you bonded. What has been joined cannot be severed. The priest produced a small knife. Cut Dante's palm first, then mine. Pressed our bleeding hands together. The bond snapped into place like a physical thing, like a rope wrapping around my chest and pulling tight. Suddenly I could feel him, not physically but emotionally. Feel his emotions like they were my own. Satisfaction, cold calculation, and underneath it all, something that felt almost like loneliness. It was gone before I could examine it. Dante pulled his hand away, and the priest wrapped both our palms in white cloth to stop the bleeding. Congratulations, someone said. No one sounded particularly enthusiastic about it. Dante turned to me. We're done here. Go back to the house. I'll join you in an hour. He walked away before I could respond. Just left me standing there in white clothes and a bandaged hand with a bond in my chest that felt like a collar. I went back to my room because I didn't know what else to do. Sat on the bed and tried to process what had just happened. I was married, bonded, connected forever to a man who'd admitted he didn't want me, who saw me as a political tool, who'd threatened everyone I loved if I didn't behave. Through the bond, I could feel him, distant but there, like a second heartbeat. His emotions were controlled, locked down tight, but I could feel the edges of them. Frustration, impatience, something darker I didn't want to name. An hour passed, then another. The sun started setting. Finally, I heard footsteps in the hallway. The door opened without knocking. Dante stood in the doorway, and the look on his face made my stomach drop. "Strip," he said. My blood turned to ice. "What?" "Strip. We need to complete the bond. That requires physical contact, skin to skin. Unless you want to spend the rest of your life feeling half-connected, I suggest you do what I'm telling you." I thought, "You said you wouldn't force." "I'm not forcing you to have sex. I'm forcing you to complete a bond that's currently incomplete and causing me significant discomfort. There's a difference." He moved into the room, closing the door behind him. "I can feel your terror through the bond. It's distracting. Strip down to your underwear. That's sufficient skin contact for bonding purposes." My hand was shaking so badly I could barely undo buttons. But I did what he said because I didn't have a choice. Pulled off my shirt. My pants. Stood there in just my underwear, feeling more exposed than I'd ever felt in my life. Dante stripped off his own shirt with efficient movements. His chest was exactly what I'd expected. Muscled, scarred, powerful. Evidence of a life lived violently. "Lie down on the bed." I did, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might actually break through my ribs. He lay down beside me. Not touching yet, just close. I could feel heat radiating off him. "This is going to feel intense," he said, and it was the closest thing to gentle his voice had been all day. "The bond completes through sustained skin contact. It'll hurt at first. It'll feel good. Then it'll settle. Try not to panic." "What if I do panic?" "Then I hold you down until it's done." "But I'd rather not. So try to breathe." He pulled me against him before I could brace for it. Chest to chest. His arms around me. So much skin contact that the bond roared to life between us. Pain. Searing, white-hot pain that made me gasp and try to pull away. Dante's arms tightened, keeping me pressed against him. Breathe through it. It passes. It did pass. The pain faded into something else. Something warm and overwhelming and intimate in ways I didn't have words for. I could feel him now. Really feel him. His emotions weren't just edges anymore. They were fully present in my mind. Frustration at the situation. Resignation about the marriage. Discomfort at holding someone he barely knew. And buried so deep, I almost missed it. Loneliness. Bone deep. Aching loneliness that felt like it had been there for years. "I can feel you," I whispered against his chest. "I know. I can feel you too. Terror. Grief. Resignation. You're an open book." His hand moved to the back of my head, fingers threading into my hair. "Not sexual, just contact. But you're also brave. Braver than you think. Most Omegas would have broken down by now. You're still fighting." "I don't feel brave. I feel terrified." Fear and bravery aren't mutually exclusive. His grip on me softened slightly. "The bond is settling. A few more minutes, and it'll be complete. Then I'll let you go." We lay there in silence while the bond finished weaving itself between us. Permanent. Unbreakable. I could feel every emotion he was feeling, and he could feel mine. There are no secrets anymore. No privacy. Just this overwhelming, intimate connection that made me want to cry and scream and run all at the same time. Finally, the intensity faded to something manageable. A constant awareness in the back of my mind. His emotions. His presence. Dante released me and sat up immediately, putting distance between us like he couldn't stand the closeness. "It's done. The bond is complete." He pulled his shirt back on, movements sharp and controlled. "You can feel me now. I can feel you. Get used to it. It doesn't go away. I know how bonds work." "Do you?" "Because you look like you're about to have a panic attack." He grabbed my shirt from where I discarded it and threw it at me. "Get dressed. I'm not spending the rest of the night looking at you half naked." I pulled on my clothes with shaking hands, hyper-aware of his emotions through the bond. Frustration, discomfort, and that persistent loneliness that he was trying so hard to bury. When I was dressed, he looked at me with those cold, dark eyes. "I'm going to make something very clear to you, Kai. I didn't want this. I didn't want a husband. I didn't want to be bonded to someone I barely know. But it's done now, and we're stuck with each other. So here's how this is going to work." He moved closer, and I forced myself not to back away. "You'll live here. You'll have access to most of the estate. My security will ensure you don't leave without permission. You'll attend family functions when required. You'll present as my devoted husband to anyone outside this house. In private, you do whatever you want as long as it doesn't interfere with my work or my operations. He paused. I won't touch you again unless it's necessary. I won't force myself into your bed. And I won't pretend this is anything other than what it is, a political arrangement neither of us wanted. What about, I had to force the words out. What about heirs? Isn't that usually part of these arrangements? Eventually, when we've both adjusted to this situation. Not now. You're barely more than a child. I'm not interested in forcing you into something you're clearly not ready for. His expression softened slightly, barely perceptible, but I could feel it through the bond. Despite what you think, I'm not completely heartless. I won't make your life more miserable than it has to be. Then what do you want from me? I want you to not betray me. I want you to not make me regret showing you mercy. And I want you to try to adjust to this situation instead of fighting it constantly. That's all. He walked to the door. I have work to do. You should rest. Tomorrow starts your new life as a Vtorio. Try not to disappoint me. He left. I sat alone in that enormous bedroom and felt his emotions through the bond as he moved through the house. Frustration, exhaustion, that persistent loneliness that never quite went away. And I realized something that terrified me more than anything else. Dante Vittorio wasn't just a monster. He was a man, a complicated, damaged man who'd been forced into this marriage the same way I had. And through the bond, I could feel that he was just as miserable about it as I was. Days passed, then weeks. My life settled into a strange routine. Dante was gone most of the time. Business, he said. Running an empire required constant attention. I didn't ask what kind of business. Didn't want to know the details of whatever illegal activities he was involved in. When he was home, we existed in careful parallel. We'd eat dinner together sometimes, mostly in silence, though occasionally he'd ask about my day or make some comment about his work. We never touched except when absolutely necessary. We slept in separate rooms. Through the bond, I could feel him constantly. His moods, his emotions, the weight of whatever he was dealing with that he'd never tell me about. And slowly, against my will, I started to understand him. He wasn't cruel. He was controlled. Everything he did was calculated, measured, designed to maintain the power he'd built. He'd inherited his empire young. I'd learned that much from overheard conversations, and had spent years proving himself to men who thought he was too young, too reckless, too everything. He was lonely, desperately, achingly lonely in a way that made my chest hurt. He had advisors and soldiers and people who feared him, but no one who actually knew him. No one he trusted enough to show vulnerability to. Until me. Not because he wanted to, but because the bond made it impossible to hide. I could feel when he was stressed, when he was angry, when he came home late and exhausted and just wanted silence. And I learned to give him space when he needed it, to talk when he seemed open to it, to exist alongside him without demanding more than he could give. It was 3 weeks into the marriage when everything changed. I was in the library, the massive room full of books that I claimed as my personal space. Dante never came in here. He wasn't a reader. So it was my sanctuary, the one place in this house that felt like mine. I heard footsteps. Heavy. Urgent. Wrong. The door opened, and Dante walked in looking like he'd been through a war. Blood on his shirt, a cut above his left eye, moving like he was hurt, but trying to hide it. Through the bond, I felt pain. Sharp and immediate. You're hurt, I said, standing up from my reading chair. It's nothing. Don't worry about it. But I could feel through the bond that it wasn't nothing. That he was in significant pain. That something had gone very wrong tonight. Let me help you. I said it's nothing. And I can feel through the bond that you're lying. I moved toward him before I could second-guess myself. Sit down. Let me look at it. For a moment, I thought he'd refuse. Thought he'd maintain his walls and his control and send me away. Instead, he sat in the reading chair I'd just vacated. The first aid kit is in the bathroom. Top cabinet. I found it and came back to find him pulling off his blood-stained shirt with movements that were too careful, too controlled. Underneath, his torso was a map of scars, some old and faded, some newer, and across his ribs, an angry gash that was still bleeding. What happened? I asked, kneeling in front of him with the first aid kit. Business disagreement. The other party disagreed more violently than expected. He winced as I touched the area around the wound. Careful. I'm trying to be. I cleaned the blood away gently, assessing the damage. This needs stitches. I know. I'll have my doctor look at it tomorrow. Or I could do it now. At his surprised look, I explained, my mother was a nurse before she married my father. She taught me basic field medicine. Said it was important for omegas to be able to take care of themselves since no one else would. Your mother sounds like a practical woman. She was. Before she learned that being practical didn't matter in our world. Before she learned to just accept things. I threaded the needle from the kit with steady hands. This is going to hurt. I've had worse. I believed him. The scars prove that. I worked in silence, stitching the wound closed with movements my mother had taught me years ago. Dante sat perfectly still, barely flinching even when I knew it had to hurt. Through the bond, I could feel his pain, but also something else. Surprise. Confusion. Like he couldn't quite believe I was helping him. Why are you doing this? He asked finally. Because you're hurt. And because I can. I tied off the last stitch and started bandaging the area. And because despite everything, I don't want you to be in pain. We barely know each other. We're bonded. I know you better than you think. I looked up at him. I can feel your emotions, remember? I know you're lonely. I know you're exhausted. I know you're carrying weight that's crushing you, and you won't let anyone help because you think asking for help is weakness. His jaw tightened. You don't know anything about me. Don't I? I sat back on my heels. You inherited your family's empire at 19. You spent years proving yourself to people who thought you were too young. You made yourself into something terrifying because terrifying meant you'd survive. You don't have friends. You don't have anyone you trust. You have an empire and power and money, and you're still the loneliest person I've ever met. Through the bond, I felt his shock, his anger, and underneath it, the terrible vulnerability of being seen. Stop. Why? Because I'm right? Because you don't like that someone can see past the monster you've made yourself into? Because you're supposed to be afraid of me. He stood abruptly, towering over me. You're supposed to remember that I own you, that I could hurt you, that I'm dangerous, and you should keep your distance and never, ever think you understand me. But I'm not afraid of you anymore. The words came out quiet. True, I was. That first night, that first week. But I can feel your emotions, Dante. I know when you're angry. And you're not angry at me right now. You're angry at yourself for letting me see you. He stared at me for a long moment. Then he sat back down heavily, like the fight had gone out of him. You shouldn't have helped me. Probably not. But I did anyway. I finished securing the bandage. You should rest. That wound needs time to heal. I have work. That can wait until tomorrow. You're exhausted. I can feel it. I stood up, putting the first aid kit away. Go to bed, Dante. Actual bed. Not your office where you'll work until dawn and pretend you're fine. Since when do you give me orders? Since you're too stubborn to take care of yourself. I paused at the door. And since I'm your husband, even if it's just political, taking care of you is technically part of the arrangement. I left before he could argue. That night, lying in my bed, I felt his emotions through the bond. Confusion, frustration, and something that felt dangerously like gratitude. I crossed a line tonight. Stopped maintaining the careful distance we'd established. Let myself care about whether he was hurt. And through the bond, I felt him lying in his own bed, awake, feeling the same thing. Everything changed after that night. Not dramatically, not all at once, but gradually like ice melting in spring. Dante started coming to the library in the evenings. Not to read, just to sit in the chair across from mine while I read, and he worked on his laptop. We didn't talk much, but the silence was comfortable instead of tense. He started asking about my day with genuine interest instead of polite obligation. I started asking about his work, and he started actually telling me things. Not everything, not the truly dark details, but enough that I understood the weight he carried. We started eating dinner together every night instead of just sometimes. Started talking about things that had nothing to do with politics or family or obligation. Books, music, childhood memories that weren't completely terrible. Through the bond, I felt him slowly letting his walls down. Not completely, but enough that I could see glimpses of the man underneath the monster. And I felt myself responding to it. Felt myself starting to care about this complicated, damaged man who'd been forced into marriage the same way I had. It was 6 weeks into the marriage when he knocked on my bedroom door at 2 in the morning. I opened it to find him standing in the hallway in just sleep pants, looking haunted. Can't sleep? I asked. Nightmare. The bond. You probably felt it. He ran a hand through his hair. I didn't mean to wake you. You didn't. I was already awake. I stepped aside. Do you want to come in? He hesitated. We'd maintained separate bedrooms carefully, separate spaces. But through the bond, I could feel his exhaustion, his need for something he couldn't name. Just for a while, he said finally. We sat on my bed, careful not to touch, maintaining distance out of habit, but being in the same space helped. I could feel his anxiety settling through the bond. What was the nightmare about? I asked. My father. He died when I was 19. Sometimes I dream about it. He stared at the wall. He was killed by men who worked for him, men who thought they could take over once he was gone. I had to kill them all, every single one, to prove I was strong enough to lead. How many? 17 men. I was 19 years old, and I killed 17 men in one night because the alternative was dying myself. His voice was flat, emotionless, but through the bond I felt the old pain, the trauma that never quite healed. That's who I am, Kai. That's what I'm capable of. And you should remember that before you start thinking I'm anything other than a monster. You were 19. They would have killed you if you didn't kill them first. That's not being a monster. That's surviving. Is there a difference? Yes. Because monsters don't have nightmares about the people they've killed. Monsters don't feel guilt or regret or any of the things I can feel you feeling right now through the bond. I shifted closer without quite touching him. You're not a monster, Dante. You've done monstrous things. But that's not the same. You're very determined to see good in me. I'm determined to see the truth. And the truth is complicated. I paused. Can I ask you something? Depends on a question. Why did you really agree to this marriage? Your advisor suggested it, but you could have said no. You could have kept fighting the war. Why didn't you? He was quiet for a long time. Then, because I'm tired. I've been fighting for control of this empire since I was 19. 13 years of constantly proving myself. Constantly watching for threats. Constantly being alone because trusting people gets you killed. And I just wanted it to stop. Wanted something that wasn't about power or violence or proving myself. So you agreed to marry a stranger. I agreed to a bond with someone who wasn't part of this world. Someone who didn't want anything from me except to be left alone. Someone who might actually be safe to be around. He finally looked at me. I know you didn't choose this. I know you were forced into it the same way I forced myself into it for political reasons. But I thought maybe, eventually, it might be something other than obligation. What did you want it to be? I don't know. Something real, maybe. Something that wasn't about power or family or any of the bullshit that controls everything else in my life. He laughed bitterly. Stupid, right? Thinking a political marriage could ever be anything real. I don't think it's stupid. I reached out slowly, giving him time to pull away. When he didn't, I took his hand. I think you're lonely. I think you've been lonely for so long you forgot what it feels like to not be lonely. And I think maybe we're both stuck in a situation neither of us wanted, but that doesn't mean it has to stay terrible forever. His fingers tightened around mine. What are you saying? I'm saying that I can feel your emotions through the bond. I know you're not the monster everyone thinks you are. I know you're just a man who's been forced to be strong for so long that you forgot how to be anything else. I moved closer until our shoulders were touching. And I'm saying that I'm tired of being afraid. Tired of maintaining distance. Tired of pretending we're just business partners when the bond makes us so much more than that. Okay, let me finish. Please. I took a breath. I didn't want this marriage. I didn't want you. But it's been 6 weeks, and I've gotten to know you through the bond in ways I couldn't avoid even if I wanted to. And I've realized something terrifying. What? I don't hate you. I don't even resent you anymore. I just want you to be happy. Want you to have someone who actually sees you instead of just seeing the devil of New York. Want to be that person if you'll let me. The emotions flooding through the bond were overwhelming. Shock, hope, fear, longing so deep it made my chest ache. You don't know what you're saying. Eat dull. I'm saying I want to try. Actually try. Not just coexist in the same house. Not just fulfill political obligations. But try to build something real with you. I squeezed his hand. If you want that too. For a long moment, he didn't move. Didn't speak. Just sat there processing what I'd said, his emotions churning through the bond. Then he pulled me into his arms. Not sexual, not demanding, just holding me like I was something precious. Something he was afraid to break. I want that, he whispered against my hair. God, I want that so much. But I don't know how. I don't know how to be what you're asking me to be. Neither do I. But maybe we can figure out together. We stayed like that for a long time, just holding each other, feeling each other's emotions through the bond, finally letting down the walls we'd both been maintaining. And when we finally pulled apart, something had fundamentally shifted between us. Stay, I said. Tonight. Just sleep here. I don't want to be alone, and I don't think you do either. Just sleep. Just sleep. Nothing else. Not until we're both ready. I lay down, making room for him. Is that okay? He lay down beside me, and I felt his relief through the bond. Relief at not being alone. Relief at being allowed to be vulnerable. Relief at finally having someone who saw him as human instead of monster. I curled against his chest, and his arms came around me automatically. Thank you, he murmured, for seeing me, for not running when you saw what I really am. Thank you for letting me see you. We fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, the bond humming contentedly between us. And when I woke up the next morning, he was still there, still holding me, still choosing to stay instead of running back to his walls and his control. Everything changed that night. We started sleeping in the same bed, started touching without flinching, started talking about real things instead of surface pleasantries. Dante told me about his childhood, about a father who'd been brutal in his methods of teaching, about learning early that showing weakness meant punishment, about inheriting an empire and having to become something terrifying just to survive. I told him about my family, about being the Omega disappointment, about years of being told I was worthless, about finally finding someone who saw value in me, even if it took a forced marriage to find it. We learned each other, not just through the bond, but through actual conversation, through shared silences, through moments of vulnerability that neither of us had ever shown anyone else. And slowly, impossibly, we fell in love. Not the easy kind of love, not the kind from fairy tales, but the complicated, hard-won kind that comes from choosing each other every day despite everything working against you. It was 8 weeks into the marriage when he kissed me for the first time. We were on the terrace at sunset, watching the city below. He'd had a hard day. I'd felt it through the bond, and I'd pulled him outside for air and quiet. I love you, he said suddenly, looking at me instead of the view. My heart stopped. What? I love you. I didn't mean to. I tried not to, but I love you, Kai, and I needed you to know. I kissed him then, pouring 8 weeks of complicated feelings into it. Fear and hope and frustration and affection all tangled together. When we pulled apart, we were both breathing hard. I love you too, I whispered. Even though this whole situation is insane and we barely know each other and we were forced together by circumstances neither of us wanted. I love you anyway. He laughed, genuine and warm and completely unlike the cold man I married 2 months ago. We're both idiots, completely, but we're idiots together. That night, we made love for the first time, not out of obligation, not to fulfill some bonding requirement, but because we wanted to, because we'd chosen each other despite everything. And it was perfect, gentle and intense, and overwhelming in the best way. 2 people who'd been alone for so long finally finding home in each other. Afterward, lying tangled in sheets with his arms around me, I felt completely safe for the first time in my life. What happens now? I asked. Now we build something real. Something that's ours. Not our families. Not politics. Just us. He kissed my forehead, and we figure out how to be happy despite all the impossible circumstances. That sounds nice. It sounds impossible, but so is falling in love with you, and I managed that. I laughed and burrowed closer. Through the bond, I could feel his contentment, his peace, his love, and I knew, despite everything, despite the forced marriage and the political complications and all the darkness in our world, we were going to be okay, because we had each other, and sometimes that was enough. 3 months after our wedding, everything fell apart. My brother Hiroshi showed up at the estate, bleeding, desperate, begging for sanctuary. Worked perfectly. The stupid Omega actually convinced Vtorio to let me in. Another day, and I'll have access to his security systems. We can strike from inside, kill Vtorio, take back our territory, and sell the Omega to the Bratva like Father planned. My blood turned to ice. The kid never knew. Father sold him thinking he was ending a war, but really he was sending us a weapon. An Omega bonded to Vtorio who could get us inside. And once Vittorio's dead, we sell the Omega to the Russians. They've been asking for